I heard Cambodia. I heard that I live in a world where children are sold for sex. If you have vulnerable children in any shape, form, or fashion, and if you have money, and if you have men, then sex is being purchased. California is the #1 state in the nation. Sex trafficking, human trafficking is huge. And over again, I would read, there are no homes and services for victims. As prostitutes, not my word, their word, that they said to me, I once was one of those little girls, and would you please build that home, because my life would have been totally different if someone had had that home for me when I was 13 or 14.
Welcome to Pure Passion. My name is Stacia Freeman. Probably for most people, when they think of sex trafficking, they think of dangerous criminals and perverts and a world so beyond their knowledge, experience, and comfort zone that the thought of becoming involved in the solution is dismissed out of hand immediately. But one day, Jenny Williamson was watching someone speak on the subject, and you won't believe what God told her to do.
One Sunday, 4 years ago, I went to my church, like I always do, and I heard a gentleman named Don Brewster speak about sex trafficking in Cambodia. I heard Cambodia. I heard that I live in a world where children are sold for sex, and it was like, I don't know where I've been. I'm a mom. My husband and I own a business together. We're trying to raise our kids. We're just trying to pay the light bill. But all of a sudden, this thing just stopped me dead in my tracks and recalibrated my entire life. And as I sat and listened to Don talk about kids in Cambodia, I really thought God was calling me to Cambodia, because that was my only point of reference at that moment, was kids in Cambodia. And I sobbed and I cried. I had a fight with God. I asked him to take sex trafficking off the table. I screamed to him from the depths of my soul, why don't you do something? And he said to me in that still, quiet whisper of his, why don't you? Immediately after that, for 2 weeks, I just cried and sobbed and hurt. My heart hurt, physically hurt so bad. And that's never happened to me. I mean, I watch the news every night. Things can make me sad. I'm a mom. I hate injustice in this world, but nothing has ever affected me like this. And I talked to a friend of mine, and just a spiritual mom, if you will, and she said, I think what's happening is Jesus is letting you feel his heart for these kids. And I said, it's unbearable. And it lasted a couple of weeks. And then after that heart-wrenching feeling stopped, I did what anybody does when they need great godly wisdom. I went to Google, and I Googled the words human trafficking and sex trafficking, and I was absolutely shocked that my hometown was the first city that appeared on my computer. I still say God was messing with me in my computer that day, but Sacramento, California, came up on the screen as one of the worst destinations for sex trafficking. And at that moment, I still thought we were talking about foreign-born citizens, which was fine. I was ready to open a home for anybody that the Lord said needed to be here. But as I started reading the research in the state of California, actually the government had just produced a report about sex trafficking in the area, and it said California is the #1 state in the nation. Sex trafficking, human trafficking is huge. And over again, I would read, there are no homes and services for victims. So it was just this report of this big, huge problem, but there was no solution. And in this day and age, especially at my age, I thought there were solutions for every problem. I absolutely was shocked that there was an issue still on the table, that there weren't resources on every corner if you wanted it. And so I picked up the phone, my great leap of faith, and I called the author of that report at the state capitol in California. And my knees were shaking and I was scared to death. It really felt like I was walking on water, because I have no idea about this topic. I'm not educated in this field whatsoever. My husband's in the natural gas business. That's what we do, our business. And I called the author of the report, and I was shocked when she answered the phone. And I said, is there really a problem? And she said, yes, there is. And I said, I have a nonprofit organization and I'd like to talk to you about the solution. And she invited me to the Capitol, and we met and we talked about that. And I said, it's God's people, his people. It's our responsibility, and we'll build the home. And I think she thought I was a little bit crazy when I said that because I had no tangible resources, just the fact that God said we have to take care of widows and orphans, and these kids are orphans. And so my next phone call was to the local police in Sacramento, and I said, do we really have a problem? And they said, yes, would you like to have coffee? And I said, sure. And the next thing I know, I was at the police station, and I met with a detective there, and he told me that the kids that are in our area were domestic kids, our kids. And I don't know why. It's not that it made it worse for me, but I just didn't know. I thought we were talking about kids that were being shipped here, and we are, and there definitely is that problem. But in our area, the domestic kids is just huge, the problem there. And so there was an FBI task force that had already been set up in my area, and the vice cop that I met with asked me if I would like to meet the FBI, and I said, sure, why not? So the next thing I know, I'm having coffee with the FBI, and I said, what do you need? What do you need? And they said, we need a home. And I said, okay, God's people will build it. And so I became known as the crazy religious lady around the Sacramento Police Department. And I just kept saying, God's people are going to build this home. And I'd say, God, where are your people? So I would go with great confidence to the government and to the police and the FBI, and I would say, God's people are going to build this home for you. And then I would cry to the Lord on my face, where are your people? Where are your resources? I'll do this. I'll be your point person. But I am not a fundraiser. I am a mom. That's all I am. And the Lord just spoke to me and said, well, that's all these kids need. You just keep being a mom, and I'll take care of everything else. And the next thing I know, my picture is on the front page of the Sacramento Bee, where they absolutely did a report on a dream that God put on somebody's heart. And in California, that just doesn't happen a lot. It was amazing because the people that were calling in response to the article that was in the paper 3 years ago said, I have been praying about specifically what the Lord would have me do next in this area. It was pastors, it was Christians. My prayer that I had just cried out to God, where are your people? Well, 200 of them called that day when they saw the article in the paper, and they said, we're in. Some said, I've been reading about human trafficking for the last couple of years, and it's broken my heart, but I just didn't know what to do. And I just declared in that article that God's people were going to build a home, and that's what the FBI needed, that's what the vice cops needed, is they needed a home for these kids. There were 3 phone calls of all those that were the most interesting to me, and it was 3 women that identified themselves as prostitutes, not my word, their word, that they said to me, I once was one of those little girls, and would you please build that home, because my life would have been totally different if someone had had that home for me when I was 13 or 14. And tearfully cried and recounted their story of sexual abuse and how back then it wasn't called trafficked, but how they were trafficked. And it was uncanny to me because it was 3 different women from 3 different ages, but they all said the exact same thing to me. And they ended their sentence with, they just need someone to believe in them.
She is lost and alone, waiting to be found and find a place that she can call her home. Her innocence was stolen, her shattered heart is broken. Quietly suffering, she cries, believe in me, believe in me. I'm longing for my captive heart to be free. Daughter, you are not alone. He died so you can live. He gives
Do not sit there and say, this is not happening in my town, because I can promise you, I can guarantee you it is. Because if you have vulnerable children in any shape, form, or fashion, and if you have money, and if you have men, then sex is being purchased, and it's now called sex trafficking. So call the local police department. That's what I did, and find out, are they aware of the problem? Are they actively pursuing the recovery of girls? And ask them what they need. What these kids need is to know that they were created on purpose, for a purpose, before time began. And before I have the right and privilege to tell them that, they've got to have a roof over their head, and they've got to have food on the table, and they've got to have clothes, and they've got to have an education, and their medical needs have to be met, and their emotional, physical, and spiritual needs have to be met. So all that sounded just like what my kids needed to have in a home. And so the Lord just said, tell the girl's story. So anywhere and everywhere I went, I told people about the problem of sex trafficking. And I told them who the kids were, and I don't know how to describe it except that they are my daughters. I have 3 biological sons. I always wanted daughters, and the Lord said to me, these are your daughters. And so in my mind, my daughters are missing, and I need to tell you that. And I need you to help me find them, and I need to explain what that looks like. And as I did all that and told the story, one day, as I told the story, somebody walked up to me and said, I have your land. And the day that she said that to me, I looked at photos of the property, and it was the exact picture in my mind that the Lord had given me. And so now that we'd identified the property without a real estate agent, we started talking about how to bring this story to the church. And so the music video was that piece of the puzzle, and local artists and local musicians in our area just started calling me. I didn't call anybody. I didn't ask anybody for anything. Just anywhere I had the opportunity, I told the story that there are children on the streets in our area being sold for sex. The youngest in our area that had been recovered was 11, and that they had no home, and they kept going back to the streets, and that God's desire was for them to have a home. And we call it Courage House because it'll take courage for them to have to walk that road of healing and go back through that trauma. And people just started asking us to come to their churches, and we ended up putting on concerts, awareness events. The FBI that I partnered with would go with me, and they would talk about the problem in our area, and then I would talk about the dream. And we would sing that song and play that music video for these kids, and we painted the dream of their destinies. We started telling people that some of these kids were meant to be doctors, and we were going to send them to medical school. And some of these kids were meant to be dancers, and we were going to make sure that they danced. And some were supposed to cut hair, and we were going to send them to beauty school. And the next thing I know, in the worst economy, in however many years, we raised $700,000 in cash and bought that property, and the owners financed the balance for us. We live in a world where children are sold for sex daily. This isn't happening just in Cambodia and Thailand and Africa and in India. It's happening right here in the United States. Research shows there are over 500,000 children being sold for sex in the United States every day, every night. The average age, 13, 14 years old. There are only 3 homes in the entire United States that focus on the unique needs of these children. But our organization, Courage to Be You, wants to change that. We have a passion to see homes built in every city in the United States and around the world where there isn't one. We call these homes Courage House. This is the most unified